When I moved into Willow Heights, I thought I'd found a quiet sanctuary, an escape from the chaos of city life. The neighborhood was pristine, the homes nearly identical in their suburban charm, and everything had its place. A little too perfect, maybe, but I wasn't looking for excitement. Just a place to breathe. Then I met Linda Hargrave. Linda was the kind of woman who spoke in regulations and breathed in HOA bylaws. She wore a permanent frown and a pair of oversized sunglasses that never left her face, even on cloudy days. As president of the Willow Heights Homeowners Association, she ruled the neighborhood like a hawk circling a mouse, always watching, always ready to swoop. I tried to stay off her radar. My name's Jordan Hayes, 37, freelance graphic designer, self-proclaimed introvert. I bought the last house on Maple Crest Lane, a corner lot with a tall wooden fence and enough backyard space to make me feel like I own a piece of the world. I kept to myself, followed the HOA handbook, and paid my dues on time. It wasn't enough. The first warning came in the form of a yellow slip taped to my door. Patio furniture does not comply with community visual standards. I had a black wrought iron table with matching chairs. Elegant, classic, but apparently not beige enough for Linda's tastes. I replaced it with something more neutral. Then came the lawn citation. I'd planted wildflowers in the corner of my backyard. Be friendly, low maintenance. But Linda said it looked too natural and invited pests. A $50 fine. I gritted my teeth and reseeded it with HOA-approved Kentucky bluegrass. The third strike? A bird feeder. She claimed it attracted squirrels. At that point, it became clear. Linda had a problem with me. Maybe she thought I didn't fit the community. Maybe she didn't like that I worked from home or kept to myself. Or maybe she just needed someone to dominate, and I was easy prey. Still, I stayed silent. I didn't want a war. I wanted peace. But then Linda crossed a line so absurd, so brazen, that it cracked something in me. It happened on a Saturday morning. I woke to the sound of music. Cheesy acoustic covers of Ed Sheeran songs. Then came voices. Laughter. Clinking glasses. I stumbled to the window, still half asleep, and pulled back the curtain. My jaw dropped. My entire backyard had been transformed. White tents. Dozens of folding chairs. Linen-covered tables. A full buffet line. A DJ booth. An arch wrapped in synthetic roses at the back of my yard, directly where my fire pit used to be. And people. Everywhere. Guests in suits and dresses. Mingling, drinking champagne under my maple tree. I yanked on a hoodie and rushed outside. "Hey!" I shouted, stepping into the yard. "What is this?" A young man in a vest and tie turned around, startled. "Are you Jordan Hayes?" "Yes." I barked. "Who are you?" He looked sheepish. "I'm with the catering company." Ms. Hargrave said this property was reserved for a wedding." "Wedding?" I blinked. "This is my house. My yard. No one asked me for anything." He took a step back. I was just told to set up here." I stormed toward the back fence where the gate connected to the community garden. That's when I saw her, Linda, standing at the threshold in a powder blue dress and pearls, sipping wine from a plastic flute like she was at Buckingham Palace. She turned to me with a smile that barely concealed her irritation. "Jordan, so glad you're home. What the hell is going on?" I demanded. "Oh, don't make a scene," she said, waving me off. "It's my niece's wedding. The community clubhouse was double booked, and we needed a space. So you use my yard?" She blinked. "Well, it's such a large and used space. And really, you don't entertain. You barely come out back at all. That's not the point. This is my private property. Don't be so selfish, Jordan. It's just for the afternoon. I'll have the lawn cleaned afterward, maybe even resodded. My brother-in-law owns a landscaping company." "You had no permission," I said, my voice tightening. "This is trespassing." Linda's smile sharpened. "You know, if you'd shown a little more community spirit, you might have been invited." Then she turned and walked away, leaving me standing in my own yard like a stranger. I should have called the police. Should have raised hell. But as I stood there, fuming, a slow, steady fire ignited in my chest. Linda had pushed too far this time. She thought I was weak, that I'd fold like I always did. She was wrong. I walked back inside, pulled out my phone, and scrolled through my contacts. Eli Santiago, my cousin, mechanic, proud member of the Steel Vultures Biker Club. Not a gang per se, but definitely not HOA-approved company. Loud, leather-clad, tattooed. They weren't criminals, just rough around the edges. The kind of people Linda would have reported just for parking too long at the curb. I hit call. Yo! Eli answered on the second ring. What's up, cuz? You busy? Nah. Why? You and your crew feel like crashing a wedding? There was a pause. You want us to crash a wedding? In my backyard. HOA Karen through it without permission. Eli laughed. You serious? Dead serious. He didn't ask for details. We'll be there in an hour. I hung up and stared out at the white tents in my yard. The picture of a perfect wedding. I smiled. Let's see how Linda handles a real community gathering. An hour later, the wedding was in full swing. Karen's niece stood beneath the arch in my yard, exchanging vows with a man who looked like he just stepped off a yacht. A string quartet played softly under one of the canopies. Waitstaff glided between tables with hors d'oeuvres and chilled wine. It looked like something out of a bridal magazine, and it made me sick. I sat inside my house, blinds drawn, watching from the shadows like a prisoner in my own home. Every second that ticked by added fuel to the fire burning in my chest. Then, just as the officiant cleared his throat and began the ceremony, I heard it, a distant low rumble. It started like a whisper, a faint vibration that tickled the glass of my window. Then it grew, louder, deeper, rolling in like a storm front. I smiled. The sound of revving engines broke through the polite wedding music, like a chainsaw in a church. I stood and stepped outside, just as Eli and the Steel Vultures pulled up to the curb. There were 10 of them, chrome and steel, black leather, and denim. Each bike looked like a mechanical beast, polished to an intimidating gleam. The riders wore matching vests stitched with the club's patch, a vulture gripping a wrench in his talons. They dismounted in unison, their boots thudding against the pavement like war drums. Eli pulled off his helmet, grinning beneath aviator sunglasses. Nice neighborhood, he said. Real symmetrical. I chuckled. Welcome to the HOA. Karen's music had stopped. Her guests were staring, confused, anxious. A few of them stepped away from their tables, clutching their champagne glasses like shields. Linda appeared from behind the buffet table, already marching across the yard in her heels, face flushed. What is the meaning of this? She barked. Who are they? I walked toward her slowly, letting the tension hang between us. They're my guests, I said evenly. You're, she sputtered. Jordan, this is a formal event. You can't just... You mean like how you hosted a formal event in my backyard without permission? Her mouth opened, closed. She looked over the bikers again, growing visibly uncomfortable as Eli and his crew began mingling, grabbing mini quiches, complimenting the bride's dress, and commenting loudly about the fancy yard setup. This isn't a place for them, she hissed. They're not part of this community. Neither was your wedding, I said, my voice calm but icy. But since we're apparently sharing yards now, I figured I'd contribute some community spirit. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. You're embarrassing me in front of my family. Good, I said simply, because you walked over every line I had. She opened her mouth to argue, but a sharp rev from one of the bikes startled her. Behind her, a biker named Moose, 6'5" and built like a tank, was teaching the flower girl how to fist bump. The DJ, clearly unsure what to do, started playing a classic rock song at a low volume, trying to read the crowd. I turned to Eli. You guys hungry? He grinned, famished. Within minutes, the Steel Vultures had fully integrated into the wedding. They weren't causing damage, far from it. They were polite, well-behaved, even charming. One of them helped an elderly guest to a chair. Another snapped pictures of the couple with a surprising level of professionalism, but their presence changed everything. Karen's relatives were clearly uncomfortable. The bride looked like she wanted to cry. The groom kept checking his watch. The officiant lost his place twice. The fantasy was cracking, and Linda knew it. She stormed back to the center aisle, hands clenched at her sides. She climbed onto the tiny platform and clapped her hands, forcing silence. "I'm sorry, everyone," she said through gritted teeth. "There's been a misunderstanding. Please continue with the ceremony." But the mood was gone. The energy had shifted. The pristine, Pinterest-perfect wedding had turned into a bizarre backyard mashup between a country club and a motorcycle rally. I leaned against the fence, sipping a soda I'd taken from the buffet. Linda marched back over. "You've made your point. Now get them out of here." "I don't think so," I replied. "They're trespassing." "So were you." "That's different." "No, it's not." She stared at me, seething, jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might snap. "You'll regret this." I leaned in slightly. "No, Karen, you will." Her eyes darted toward Eli, who was now in conversation with the groom's father about vintage Harleys. She looked like she might scream. Instead, she stormed off, muttering into her phone, probably calling someone, maybe the police. But it didn't matter, because I had something better than vengeance. I had witnesses, I had footage, and I had a plan. Linda didn't leave the wedding. She retreated, stewing in the shadows like a wolf denied the last bite of a fresh kill. Her perfect ceremony had become a parody of itself. Champagne glasses clinked nervously. Conversations grew stiff, and the newlyweds looked like they were counting the seconds until they could escape to their honeymoon. Me? I was just getting started. I stepped back into my house and pulled up the security footage on my laptop. 6 separate cameras cover my property. I'd installed them months ago after the second citation. Back then, I thought I was being paranoid. Now I thank my instincts. On the screen, the entire invasion unfolded in crystal clarity. The caterers hauling gear through my back gate, the decorators setting up tents, Linda pointing and giving orders like a general at war. Not once did anyone ring my doorbell or attempt to contact me. Evidence. Clear, irrefutable. I edited a short, clean cut just a minute and a half long. Enough to show the trespassing, the setup, and Linda's command over it all. Then I paired it with second clip, her confrontation with me and my polite, denim-clad guests. I titled the video simply, "HOA President Invades Homeowner's Backyard for Unauthorized Wedding." Within 20 minutes, it was on YouTube, then Reddit, then Facebook. I posted anonymously, but the hashtags were sharp and specific. Hashtag HNightmare, hashtag Karen Takeover, hashtag Private Property Violation. It spread like gasoline on dry grass. Back outside, the biker gang was wrapping up their impromptu party. They hadn't overstayed. They didn't need to. Their presence alone had done what I hoped. Shattered the illusion of control Linda had worked so hard to maintain. Eli walked up, a toothpick dangling from his lips. "You good?" he asked, glancing toward the wilted wedding party. I nodded. "More than good. You guys were perfect." "You gonna need us again?" he asked, grinning. "Not unless the HOA tries to host prom on my roof." He laughed, clapped me on the back, and waved the crew back to their bikes. Engines roared to life once again. As they rolled down the street, I caught several neighbors peeking through curtains or standing in driveways with stunned expressions. Good. Let them look. Linda emerged from her house 2 hours later, her posture still rigid with fury. Her niece and the groom had already left. The tents were being dismantled. Workers packed up in silence, clearly sensing the chill that radiated off her. She saw me standing by my fence, arms crossed. "This isn't over," she hissed. "No," I said. "It's just beginning." Later that night, the calls began. The HOA board, normally quiet and passive, was in full panic. Apparently, several members had been tagged in the viral video, and angry emails were flooding the HOA inbox. One board member even sent me a private message. "We had no knowledge of Linda's use of your property. We do not condone her actions." Of course they didn't. The video was creeping past 200,000 views by morning. The next day, I filed a formal complaint against Linda with the city's Zoning and Property Enforcement Division. trespassing, unlawful assembly, illegal use of private property for a public event. It was a cocktail of violations. I attached video, photos, and written witness accounts from Eli and two neighbors who confirmed they'd seen the wedding staff enter through my gate. The city opened an investigation within 48 hours. But that wasn't enough. I wanted this on record. So I wrote an open letter to the Willow Heights community, printed 300 copies, and hand-delivered them to every mailbox. I made sure the tone was calm, respectful, but damning. I recounted what happened, emphasized the violation of my privacy, and urged residents to attend the next HOA meeting. That meeting was standing room only. Linda walked in late, wearing a navy blazer like a uniform, her chin tilted upward as if nothing had happened. But the room had turned against her. I stood and presented my case. The video played on projector. Gasps, murmurs. A few people actually cursed under their breath. Linda tried to defend herself, but her usual weapon, confidence, was dulled by public outrage. One woman from Elm Street stood up and said, "If you can do that to Jordan, what's stopping you from taking over my yard next time?" Another asked if HOA funds had been used for the event. Linda flinched. The board called for an emergency vote. That night, the HOA president was removed from office. Her resignation was posted on the community website under bland heading, Leadership Transition Notice. But I wasn't finished. With Linda gone, I proposed new regulations to protect homeowners from unchecked authority. A property respect clause. A mandatory vote for any community event encroaching on private land. Independent oversight of HOA complaints. Every proposal passed. 1 week later, Linda put her house up for sale. Her listing described Willow Heights as a quiet, respectful community with strong neighborly values. I laughed out loud when I saw it. The neighborhood felt lighter after she left. People smiled more, spoke to each other. Even the HOA board, once a nest of silent enablers, began hosting community nights and cookouts. Eli visited once, dropped off some homemade jerky, and winked. Guess the neighborhood cleaned up nice. "Thanks to you guys," I said. "Tell the vultures they're welcome here any time." Spring arrived quietly in Willow Heights, as if nature itself was grateful for the peace that had settled in after the storm. The HOA, once an overbearing force used to enforce arbitrary whims and bully homeowners into submission, had changed. The newly elected board, now composed of more grounded, level-headed residents, actually listened, and more importantly, they acted with fairness. For the first time since I had moved in, the community felt like just that, a community, not a surveillance zone, but it hadn't been without scars. The grass in my backyard was still patchy in places where the wedding tents had once stood. A few of my potted plants hadn't survived the trampling. And for weeks after Linda's resignation, some of her loyalists tried to stir up sympathy, whispering about how she'd been targeted or misunderstood. But most people had seen the footage. They'd read my letter. They'd watched Linda lie with confidence, only to fall when truth was given a voice. And that voice had been mine. I wasn't the same person who had sheepishly paid HOA fines and cowered behind blinds when lawn inspectors came around. That version of me had been stripped away the moment I looked out my window and saw a wedding arch in my garden. I had drawn a line, and I didn't just offend it. I turned it into a message. One evening, a neighbor named Richard, an older man who rarely spoke, stopped me while I was walking my dog. "You know," he said, tipping his cap, "you did what most of us have wanted to do for years, just never had the nerve." I smiled, glad I could be the spark. "Spark." He chuckled. "You lit the whole bonfire, son." Things kept improving. Property values held steady, not that I cared any more about HOA bragging rights. What mattered was freedom, being able to plant flowers without a violation notice, sit on my porch without getting passive-aggressive letters about aesthetic harmony, and enjoy my space without fear of it being hijacked. And every now and then, when I saw a bike roll through the neighborhood, I'd wonder if it was one of Eli's crew checking in from afar. Speaking of Eli, 3 months after the incident, I hosted a barbecue, my first real one. No permit needed, just a dozen neighbors, a smoker full of ribs, and a big cooler of drinks. I invited Eli and the Steel Vultures too, and to my surprise, Most of them showed up. Kids took pictures with the bikes. Moose let a couple of teenagers sit on his Harley. Even some of the older residents, those who had once clutched their pearls at the thought of those people in our neighborhood, found themselves laughing and swapping stories with the vultures. Eli sidled up to me near the grill, plate in hand. "You know," he said, biting into a rib, "you could have just called the cops that day. Wouldn't have sent the same message." He grinned. "Reckon you're right. Linda didn't just break a rule. She tried to remind you she was in charge. She picked the wrong backyard," I said. Eli raised his ribs like a toast. "To boundaries. And revenge." We clinked bones and laughed. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and golden light spilled over the lawns, I took a moment to just sit. I watched the people, listened to the hum of conversation, the occasional chuckle. For the first time in years, there was no tension in my shoulders, no anxiety over what I'd find taped to my door in the morning. I was home. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail, not from the HOA, not from the city. It was from a law firm representing a couple who had attended the infamous wedding in my backyard. Apparently, Linda had promised them a private, luxury venue, one she had no right to offer, and they were now suing her for damages and emotional distress. I wasn't part of the case, but they asked if I'd be willing to testify if needed. I agreed without hesitation. Poetic justice has a rhythm all its own, and Linda's symphony was far from over. She had moved 3 towns away, according to gossip, and was living in a condo complex with no HOA at all. The irony was delicious. A month later, I stood in my yard, now lush and fully restored, sipping coffee as birds fluttered to the branches above me. The space felt sacred again, mine, reclaimed and restored not just in soil and grass, but in principle. This wasn't just a story about revenge. It was about resistance, about knowing your worth, about drawing a hard, unshakable line when others try to erase it for their own convenience. It was about standing up. I didn't just win. I changed something. I turned my frustration into fire, and that fire into fuel. I used logic where they expected fear. I used humor where they expected silence. And when I invited a biker gang to my lawn, I didn't just crash a wedding, I exposed a tyranny. Linda thought she could bulldoze me with entitlement and authority. She learned that day that no one, no matter how manicured their nails or polished their image, gets to invade another person's sanctuary without consequence. Not in my yard. Not ever again.